Welcome everyone to our new YouTube video for today. We're the DimitrovBoelee piano duo. My name is Dimitri Dimitrov.
And my name is DimitrovBoelee.
And today we're going to talk to you about starting to learn a new piece from scratch. We all have pieces that we love, that we heard online, that we watched, and we really want to start playing. So once you have the score, once you have the music, what do you have to do? It's actually quite simple, but many of our students, perhaps most of our students, skip that first step. And what the first step is, reading the first bar. The very first bar has indications, has signs which are applicable throughout the whole piece. So as long as you check the first bar, everything after that goes smoother.
So today we're going to take a look at the Moonlight Sonata, the first movement, because this is a piece that many students want to play. And we're going to take a look at the very first bar.
And before Elvira shows you what's the first thing you need to do when you take the score and when you start learning the piece, I want to tell you what not to do and what many of our students do. They have the score in front of them and they start playing right away. And then later in the piece, we come up to realize that there are many mistakes and many things we actually omitted, skipped learning and skipped noticing.
And the very first thing that we see when we take a look at the first bar are the clefs. And in this case, there's nothing much going on. There's a standard situation. We have a G clef for the right hand and an F clef for the left hand. But it's very important to start building a habit of taking a look always at the clefs, because in some cases they do change. We can have two G clefs or two F clefs. It's important just to always check. Now let's take a look to the right, where we see the key signature. Next to the clefs is the key signature. And in this case we have 4 sharps, which indicates that we're either in E major or C sharp minor. Those two key signatures both have 4 sharps. Now if we take a look at the very first bar, we see a C sharp octave in our left hand. And if we play, it's very clearly a minor tonality, which means that we are very clearly, very obviously in C sharp minor. Now what that means is that we have 4 sharps throughout the piece, all Fs, all Cs, all Gs, and all Ds are all played as sharps unless indicated otherwise throughout the piece.
And after looking at the key signature and the sharps, we move one step to the right and we're going to see the letter C with a line through it. Now for those of you who don't know what this C means, it means 4/4. So generally, if we didn't have the line through it, we would be in 4/4 time signature, which means that the quarter note would be 1 beat, but the line through the C means that we are in alla breve. That's how we call it, and alla breve means that the half note is going to be 1 beat. So everything is double faster. We think in 2 instead of in 4. It's really quite simple. Just think of 2 beats per bar. You just have 2 beats per bar, which means that we're going to count like this. I'm going to play a few bars for you and I'm going to count at the same time so you can really understand how that works. We're going to have this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Alla breve is actually not that common for a slow piece, so in this case we know that Beethoven intended the piece not to be exceptionally slow. He wanted a movement throughout the piece, he wanted a certain kind of flow, and that's why he added the alla breve. And now when you start actually playing the piece from the very beginning, you can also think of this alla breve as a final goal, as something to strive for. You can definitely start studying the piece in 4, thinking in 4, so without the line through the letter C. So you can just think like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. For example, myself, when I'm practicing the piece, I practice it very often, even slower than what we are supposed to do. So I practice it really in a very slow tempo, and then I count in 4 again. So there is nothing wrong in counting in 4. What you have to understand only is that alla breve means that you can count in 2 and you can play the piece a little bit faster.
And even though it's very important to always check the first bar, as we're doing now, very carefully before we start a piece, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to instantly do those things. As for example, with the alla breve now, we would recommend that you start, because we're going to start in a much slower tempo. It's very difficult to think into. So we would recommend that to strive for, but it's good to know. It's good to have it in your head, to know in advance before you start studying the piece.
And now let's look at the last thing you need to pay attention to, and that's the tempo indication above the first bar. Again, tempo indication is something that we would like you to think as a final goal, as something to strive for. But since here the tempo indication is not necessarily fast, yes, of course, the piece is not exceptionally slow, so you have to spend some time practicing in order to achieve this kind of smooth feeling, smooth movement, fluent movement throughout the movement. Still, tempo indication is something to strive for. In this case, we have adagio sostenuto, which means that we're going to play the piece slow, and we're going to have a specific type of legato, a little bit sustained kind of legato, which means that we keep the keys that we previously played a little bit longer than usual. What's the natural legato that we usually would use is this. We release the previous key and we release the previous key again, but with sostenuto we're going to have a little bit more of a delay, and that's a nice effect for this first movement. But now let me show you another example of a tempo indication. Have a look at this first bar. Do you recognize the piece? This is the last movement of the Moonlight Sonata. And why am I showing you this example? It's because I wanted to underline the importance of a final go, having a final go from the tempo indication, never attempting to start the piece right away in the tempo indicated above the first bar. As you can see here, we have presto agitato, which means that we have to play the piece really fast, agitated. The energy is so different than the first movement. And as I mentioned in the first movement, please always think of tempo indication as a final go. It's something that indicates not only the tempo, but also the character of the piece, and it's something that we work towards. It's not something that we start right away with.
And this third movement is also a great example of why you should always be alert for the clefs. As you see, as we look in the first bar, it starts with a G clef and an F clef, but in the right hand immediately we see the change to the F clef. And this is something that you should be very alert for, otherwise you'll be playing some very strange sounding notes. Now let's look back at the first movement, because there's one more important thing to take a look at in the first bar, and that's the indication of triplets. This is something that our students would often forget to look at because they're very enthusiastic to play this beautiful piece. But it's something that's very important, as it's only indicated in the first bar, and after that it's assumed that you remembered throughout the whole piece these 8 notes are always triplets. Now that's important because otherwise you'll not be able to count it out properly. And the triplets mean that instead of 2 8 notes being equal to 1 quarter note, we have 3 8 notes being equal to 1 quarter note. And that is also the reason why these 8 notes are always written in groups of 3. And if you think in the alla breve, it will be 6 8 notes are equal to 1 half note, instead of 4 8 notes being equal to 1 half note. That is what the triplet indication means.
These are the things that we want you to remember to do when you start studying a new piece. We see it from our own experience, how important it is and what a big difference it makes in our students playing.
Don't forget to check out our courses on Skillshare and Udemy. We have some nice discounts in the description box below, as well as a 2-month free premium membership of Skillshare, with which you can watch all our courses for free during this 2 months. So check it out.
If you're on Instagram and Facebook, you can follow us as well there. If you liked our video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel if you want to be informed when we upload a new video, which is every Sunday. For us, creating this video was a pleasure, and we will see you next time.